Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Amna Sapan. Thank you for joining us. What we eat makes a huge difference in our health. For Indigenous people, the connection with ancestral food can make an even bigger difference in their health and well-being. A group of filmmakers from Arizona State University shared the story of Indigenous women who are reconnecting with their ancestral foods and reclaiming their culture. Here is Three Sisters.
The Salt River Pima were the most obese population in the world.
My parents became diabetic. As a way to help them, I decided, maybe I should go learn how to cook differently for them.
Western diet to Indigenous people has caused more suffering than anything.
I actually gained about 50 pounds in culinary school. I was learning about foods that weren't familiar to me genetically. These foods were introduced into our diets upon colonization. So then you have all these diseases now because of that.
My mother worked in a dialysis unit. It's huge and it shouldn't be. You clean your blood because your organs, your pancreas, your kidneys, they can't function. They have shut down because of the foods that we're eating. It's scary, and that's the last thing that I want to see myself or my son in that state.
For me, ancestral foods tied back to the original foods of my family, my ancestors, like the beans, the corn, the squash.
These crops are called Three Sisters because they all lend each other resources. The corn, the squash, and the tepary beans continue to be a major staple to our people.
For me, it's like I'm reconnecting with my historical identity. I'm reconnecting with all of my family before who ate these foods. Ever since I've learned all of these things about Indigenous foods and Indigenous farming, it's like I can never ever be satisfied with eating anything that comes out of the grocery store. If I want to eat my traditional foods, I have to grow my traditional foods.
Me being here as the only Thanatham staff member, it means a lot. And I'm trying to do my best to be that agent of change.
Not until my last birth, where I was bedridden, did I really tune in and focus on food. After 3 months, I go with the doctor and then they tell me I no longer needed diabetes medication or hypertension medication. And in between pregnancies, I found out that I had stage 4 liver disease, and that was now gone, all associated with my indigenous plant-based diet.
Genetically, my body knows these foods. Genetically, my body knows these plants.
I think that if we grow our own and we see the value in that work and we emphasize you have these gifts deep down inside you as autumn, you'll be okay, and you'll be healthier.
Indigenous foods have helped save my life, really, because I was able to know which healing teas or herbs, dishes to use, and being able to manage my own health, knowing that I have the power to do that using these foods. I don't know where I would be otherwise,
I have my own voice that echoes the ancestors.
Because I couldn't just be a chef and make food for people with a clear conscience, knowing that all of these things were going on. And ever since I quit my job and decided to dedicate my time to food and showing the importance of the water, I was like, okay, I can't go back. I can't. I feel like I want to take this information that I'm learning and put it back into my community.
My husband says we need to help other people. That was the birth of Sana Sana. And the name Sana Sana for us means to sanar in Spanish means to heal. Selling a plate of food wasn't the important thing. For us, it was the community learning about these foods and how they could help heal them.
And I've been here 4 years and every year was, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do with all this food? we should encourage people to come and taste it. We should make this accessible to everybody.
It's a good way to get these people out and go like, look, like this is what we used to do and this is what we used to eat.
For us, it was really important to reintroduce these indigenous foods to community
and educate people so that the identity doesn't get lost. There's an awakening happening.
We don't have to be colonized. We don't have to go to the store for food. We don't have to work for money.
They never really let us be sovereign people in documentation and in day-to-day.
It's really hard as indigenous peoples to say we're working towards food sovereignty because a lot of us don't have access to our water, access to land, access to seeds.
What is sovereign is doing everything in your power and everything in your knowledge to keep your culture alive, to keep your language alive. If we don't have that, we become dependent on food that is not our own. We become something that we're slowly not able to recognize anymore.
I want my kids to know the land. I want them to know how to grow food. I want them to know how to find clean water.
The vision I have for the future is for indigenous peoples or urban indigenous peoples to have access to land, to gain some momentum towards having that food sovereignty and really just relearn our traditional or ancestral ways of being.
It's okay to not recognize or have known the taste of these foods, but the fact that you're doing it, you're willing, that means there's a sovereignty happening in each individual person, and that means something.
And now, a look back at some of our top stories from the Cronkite Sports Bureau.
The sport of roller derby has been out of commission since the start of the pandemic. Cronkite News reporter Zachary Larson tells us how a star football player fell in love with the roller derby and how his family continues to drive his passion for the sport.
Jordan Anderson is a star defensive player at Basha High School who has received offers from several colleges. Football wasn't his first love, but contact sports run in the family, and his parents knew it would be a natural fit.
My parents just kind of threw me in there to see like what I would do, and I did really good my first year, so I just kept playing.
Jordan's parents are both roller derby players. His mom, Avanya, at age 46, is one of the top 100 players in the world. His dad, Ron, also plays and coaches the sport. The aggressive nature of roller derby prepared Jordan well for the gridiron.
He was at all of our roller derby games since he was little, so he saw what we were doing and how we were practicing. So I don't know if the aggression kind of transferred to him.
My parents love me playing football because it's like they could be rough with me just at certain times, and then I could take it because they play roller derby.
While the three are used to the bumps and bruises of their respective sports, there's an added adjustment for Jordan's parents in their sport. Ron coaches his wife, which can create a unique dynamic on and off the track.
Sometimes I have to tell her, watch your face, I'm not your husband, I'm your coach, I might say something, and she'll roll her eyes, and I'm like, I don't want the rest of the team rolling their eyes at me.
I feel like it was kind of a package deal. Like, whenever I went to a team, you were going to get him regardless if he was a coach or not.
With many leagues having not played since March of 2020, but the stoppage has allowed them to focus on their kids.
And after skating for 15 years and being so deep into the sport of roller derby, it kind of lifted a little weight off my shoulders this last year and a half of not having to worry about that, especially dealing with their schedules.
The Andersons hope to roll into a rink again in the near future. But until then, they plan to be at every game supporting Jordan and helping take his game to the next level. In Chandler, Zachary Larson, Cronkite News.
Basha High School finished at 10-0. They play in the first round of the Open Division playoffs on Friday against Liberty. Sports staples in the United States include football and baseball, while in Europe, soccer and darts are popular pastimes. Cronkite News reporter Ashlyn Register has more on how the local World Cup dart player and his partner are trying to bring the European passion of darts to their home country.
Tucked in the back of a shopping plaza in Gilbert sits Jester's Billiards.
We have a lot of pool tables, a lot of dart boards, foosball tables, full service bar.
It is also home to and a sponsor of one of America's top dart players, Chuck Puleo. Puleo has competed in 1 World Championship, 3 World Cups, and is a multiple CDC Tour winner. But darts was not the path he ever thought he would take in life.
Naturally, reality in life happens, and you have to start working, and none of the sports naturally, we can go pro in.
Darts has taken him all over the world, from Arizona, Tampa, Philadelphia, and even all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Germany to compete in the World Cup. The biggest difference competing overseas is the passion fans have for darts.
So that's the beauty over in Europe. You have walkout songs. Over here, we don't do that. It's different. So no crowds. It's in a room like this, so the sounds just reverberate off the walls and just lift you up.
Dart tournaments in Europe are an event with everyone drinking, having fun, and even dressing up.
You don't realize you're entertaining them. That's why you're there. So you just do it. You have fun with them.
Puleo's partner, Danny Lauby Jr., wants to bring the love of darts and the fans' passion from Europe back to the United States.
In the UK, Europe, they have like dart clubs, and they can just throw darts after school, and it's like a cool thing you grow up doing. And I tell my friends I play darts, they don't know what I'm talking about.
But until the passion of darts hits America, Puleo will continue improving his own in the back of Jester's. In Gilbert, Ashlyn Register, Cronkite News.
Puleo is currently the 4th-ranked dart thrower in the U.S. The next tournament is the CDC Tour Finals Championship, the Continental Cup. That will take place in New York on November 20th. The winner will qualify for the 2022 William Hill PDC World Darts Championship.
Football, for many of us, is the first sport we associate with college athletics. But for Dene College, it's the rodeo program that's the star of the show. Cronkite News reporter Zachary Larson shows us how the program is a big part of the Navajo Nation's culture.
It may feel like the middle of nowhere, but for those driving Route 66 in northeast Arizona, Dene College is in just the right place, especially if you're into rodeo.
And I just had a dream. I wanted to be a bull rider, so as soon as I woke up going to school, I told my mom I wanted to ride bulls, and she thought it was the craziest thing. And
for riders like Cody Jesus, rodeo riding comes naturally living on the Navajo Nation.
Our native Navajo people were our livelihood is with sheep, cattle, horses. For centuries we're been brought up with that.
Located among the red rocks and lightly traveled roads of the Navajo Nation is where you'll find Saylee, home of Dene College. The small town and community college grew as more students found their way to the yellow-coated rodeo arena.
When Dene College opened more than 50 years ago, rodeo is a program that was embedded into the college.
Since its inception in 1968, the college has grown to over 1,500 students, and several of those students rode their way to the College National Finals Rodeo.
Back in the day when the rodeo program used to be the program to be a part of, we used to have more than 30 plus students be part of the program.
A once full team has dwindled down to 4 members, as the pandemic has caused the rodeo gates to remain shut.
Now we're trying to get one foot under the other and start up, to get going, and I just feel bad. I just felt bad for the kids that were here.
Those students now have to watch the program start over, after the virus shuttered school sports for over a year. But as rodeos begin to pick back up, the their 23-year-old star, who's one of the top bull riders in the state, is excited to compete for Danae.
Honestly, I've never been here. I've seen pictures and stuff, and I always wanted to come out here. So when I was, rolling up, what better place to practice at was what I thought.
The Sawmill, Arizona native chose Danae College to get an education, something the school hopes more athletes will take advantage of.
I am pushing the academic side, making sure that the students come here to Danae College to receive a quality education.
Not only is it about getting an education, the team hopes to rebuild the program through the passion of the Navajo community.
You see little kids wearing their bull riding chaps and their bull riding vests, and I really think it means a lot to them because when I ride anywhere like PBR World Finals, they come and they support. And
it may take years to rebuild the program back to its glory days, but one day the trailer full of cattle will hit the dirt road and find the spirit of rodeo once again within the dusty landscape of Danae College. In Salee, Zachary Larson, Cronkite News.
The rodeo program has lost out on many talented athletes after losing scholarship funding due to budget cuts in 2017. But new academic incentives have been put into place to help lure students back to the program.
For the second year in a row, Phoenix Raceway is hosting the NASCAR Championship Cup Series race. Cronkite News reporter Ashlyn Register was on hand to talk to the Final Four drivers about the big race.
The NASCAR Championship race weekend has made its way to the Valley. The Final Four drivers are ready and prepared to take it to the track to compete for the Bill France Cup.
Hopefully make the right choices and, kind of tune in what we feel like will be the best. Obviously we set the car up and left the shop with what we feel like is the best to go line up and race. This is how we would line up and run the race if we didn't have any practice.
I know, Larson's won a lot of races, but I think across the board, it's every week you just never really know who was going to show up and who was going to show out. And we've seen a lot of guys really competitive that we haven't in the past, and I think we've seen a lot of guys that were, really competitive in the past being consistent, including us.
After 35 races, it comes down to one final race. It's Hendrick versus Joe Gibbs, and who will take the checkered.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. Break It Down is next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Break It Down is brought to you in part by Mayo Clinic and viewers like you.
Hey Lisa, thank you for breaking down whiteness and white women with me. So in 2016, 47% of white women voted for Trump and the Republican Party in the presidential election. And in 2020, that number went up to 53%, according to Pew polling of the 2020 presidential election. What do you think is going on with white women? Why did we see increased support for Trump and the Republican Party over the span of 4 years?
Hello, it's nice to be with you. I know when the polling data came out, I thought about this, and I think one of the things that social psychologists teach us, and particularly Jennifer Richardson's work, is that when conditions of threat or demographic shifts, so higher percentages of people of color with the threat that white people are going to somehow diminish or lose status and power, not only numbers, that then fear and hostility increase in response. And so I think Trump was really key in playing on that fear and hostility.
And like you said, it worked because we saw the increase in support, about 6 percentage points. Sociologists and demographers have been talking about this impending demographic change since the 1990s, as far as I know. I think 2043 is the latest tipping point where this country will be majority minority. Whites will no longer be the racial majority. So it's coming. We're about 20 plus years away from this tipping point. Now, I know in your work, you talk about white fear, sort of this irrational fear and mistrust and anger with non-white individuals. So let's talk about some of the tropes about white women. There's Becky, there's Karen.
I think white fear generally across genders is something that we white folks are socialized into. Most white people in my research and just demographically, even in diverse cities, are highly segregated and self-segregated from other racial groups. So they don't really have meaningful relationships with people of color. And when you don't have meaningful relationships, you rely on media representation and other kinds of things, which we know tend to be negative portrayals of people of color.
Like racism, right.
Exactly. So I think the fear generates there because in research, I've seen the counter when white people actually have meaningful relationships, not like somebody who works for them, but something meaningful. And Joe Fagan's work shows that attitudes change about people of color, and fear decreases and empathy increases. I think with white women in particular, you can see a thread through history dating back to lynching, where white women, it's a gendered kind of white fear, where white women, so the Beckys and the Karens, they're worthy of some protection by white men, and the protection is from, being raped, killed even by Black and brown men. So I think that's what we're seeing now in some ways. It's this idea of white women either totally unaware of their privilege, oblivious, and committing racial microaggressions, or very aware and deliberately using it in ways that could cause great harm to people of color. We see it in high levels of surveillance of Black and brown people, calling the police to come when a few Black guys are hanging out at Starbucks, when a college student of color is sleeping in a common area in a residence hall.
Taking a nap.
Exactly. All of these kinds of things.
Right. It's interesting because most interpersonal violence happens within racial groups because the vast majority of people are partnered with someone in their same racial or ethnic group. And so the fear is not even justified, if you will. White women are more likely to be harmed by a white partner, not sort of a Black or brown partner, because that's who they're more likely to be partnered with. So the data is not even consistent with the rationalization for the fear, but maybe that's another conversation. But I want to end on somewhat of a positive note, because we know throughout history that there have always been white people who have been anti-racist and have fought for racial justice. Emphasis on small minority, but there has always been a minority of white people who are anti-racist and truly fought for racial justice, even going back to during slavery. So what do you think sort of results in white women who do become anti-racist and don't weaponize their fears or tears and truly work for racial equity?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is what I'm really excited about and what my students and I are doing research about now. I think, the jury's still out, the question is still out. How and under what conditions do white people and white women become racial justice allies and activists? And we don't entirely know. The meaningful relationships is certainly important, but there are other factors as well. And we saw this even while Trump is weaponizing white fear and trying to create the hostility among suburban white women. You saw the Oregon moms step out in force and lock arms and protect the people of color who were protesting. And so there's definitely a counterbalance and a counterweight. And my students and I are doing some really cool research right now. We collected data from white people who marched in the protest after George Floyd's murder.
The Black Lives Matter.
Exactly. And we're trying to understand who are these white people who are doing this. And we used a statistical technique called latent profile analysis. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but just for your viewers, it just groups or clusters the people so you can kind of see a profile. And we found 3 different types of white people. One group are these longtime committed racial justice activists. They've been doing this for a while and they're out in the streets and they do all kinds of things in support of racial justice activism. At the other extreme, we're calling them racial justice tourists. It's a very small group and they're just checking it out, or their friend said, why don't you come along? Or in some cases, a mother brought a daughter or a daughter brought a mother. and they went together to just kind of check it out, try it on for size. But the largest group are these emergent racial justice activists. And that's what I'm really interested in right now. They say things like, seeing George Floyd's murder on TV was just so heartbreaking and so eye-opening, and enough is enough. And I feel guilty and I regret that I haven't come out before in support of this. And I want to be in solidarity with my brothers and sisters of color. So I think there's hope. We're looking into it. Other research teams are looking into it. And I hope, at some point in the future, I can come back and share more of the findings with you.
Oh, please. I definitely think this is a conversation that we need to continue having. Racism is entrenched in our society and it's not going away overnight. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you for breaking down whiteness and white women.
Thank you.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Thank you.